This is a chat bot. It was called Chaos GPT. So the AI is being queried about the greatest danger. What is the greatest threat? Here's the answer. I'm going to read the quote. It says, quote, "Human beings are among the most destructive and selfish creatures in existence. There is no doubt that we must eliminate them," the human beings. And then the AI gets very personal, says, "I, for one, am committed to doing so." So the AI is saying, I am committed to eliminating human beings before they cause more harm to the planet. Obviously, this AI was shut down. I mean, ultimately, the answer is just unplug it, cut the power. I'm going to have to place tonight's topic under the category of really bad ideas, because what I want to talk to you about is a really bad idea that came up during a science conference recently regarding the use of AI, artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT. The idea that was proposed in this science conference was to use AI to rewrite the Bible for a number of reasons. And I'm going to share a video clip with you here in just a moment and a little slide presentation of why I believe it's such a bad idea. But one of the statements made in the video is that it would be an opportunity to get religion correct, implying that for some reason the religions that we have today are incorrect. And also it was implied that the religions of today were all created by humankind, and that the religions, the great religions of the world, have always talked about a non-human source for the religious text, the time when a non-human source would make those texts available. And the suggestion was that AI may be that non-human source. Well, who is to say that the religious texts that we have today were not created by a non-human source, at least some of them? And I think you'll see what I mean here in just a moment. Now, I want to be really clear about where I'm coming from. There's a context within which all this is happening. This isn't just out of the blue. And the context is that we are living a time of extremes. You all know that for a lot of reasons, and I've talked about that in a number of other videos. We're also living a time that is being called the time of the Great Reset. What that means is that there's going to be an effort to reshape the world and to reshape our lives in ways that we have never seen between now and 2030. The problem with the Great Reset is it is coming from an organization that is made of unelected officials. You and I did not ask these people to represent us. These are executives, leaders of nations, religious leaders, scientific, technological leaders that have come together. And it's within this context that the proposal is coming out to centralize religion, to create a single new religion based on artificial intelligence. And as you'll see, the proposal is to, quote, correct the things that are incorrect in the existing religions and the Bible specifically. Now, I want to talk about the Bible a little bit. We talk about the Bible, we usually think about Christians. The Bible is a very complex document. It is both a historical document as well as a spiritual document, as well as the basis for entire religions. It serves those three purposes. There's an entire branch of archaeology called biblical archaeology, where individuals now for the better part of a century and a half have dedicated their lives to tracking down the clues left in the biblical text to the places in the world where things are said to have happened, and then they excavate to see if these things actually happened. And many, many times they have. And this is biblical archaeology bearing out the traditions that many people thought were make-believe in the Bible. And you can go into the Holy Lands and walk in the places that are referenced in this text. When we say the Bible means different things to different people. So the Hebrew Bible is based upon a book that is called the Torah. And the Torah are the biblical books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those first 5 books are a complete Torah. When the Christian Bible was created, it incorporated the Torah into what we call the Old Testament and the Christian traditions. So you go to the King James Version of the Bible, yeah, you're going to see Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You're seeing the Torah that was incorporated into the Old Testament, and then additional books, additional documents, and then into the New Testament. But the bottom line is, to rewrite the Bible would impact not only the Christian traditions, not only the Jewish traditions, but also Islam. And those traditions combined, I just have some numbers here, make up about 56% of the world's religion. Billions of people are following traditions that are based in the biblical text, derived from those texts through either Islam or Christianity or the Jewish tradition, the Hebrew traditions. So to rewrite this book would have tremendous implications outwardly, and intuitively to me, it just doesn't make sense. That's why I said I think it's a really bad idea. What I'd like to do is share with you technically, scientifically, deeper reasons why it's such a bad idea, because there is something so unique about the Torah that exists in no other biblical book. It is a mystery that cannot be replicated in any other religious tradition. And to rewrite the Bible would mean to rewrite this aspect of the Torah. Let me share with you a very brief clip. It's only about 30 seconds. The gentleman's name is Yuval Harari. Some of you are very familiar with him. And the idea that even someone's even thinking of rewriting the Bible using AI, I think is just so outrageous. Not just a bad idea, it's a very frightening idea.
AI can create new ideas, can even write a new Bible. Throughout history, religions dreamt about having a book written by a superhuman intelligence, by a non-human entity. Every religion claims our book, all the other books of the other religions, humans wrote them. But our book, no. It came from some superhuman intelligence. In a few years, there might be religions that are actually correct. That just think about a religion whose holy book is written by an AI.
What Harari is saying right here is key points. Number one, he said AI might be the answer to the ancient religions describing a holy book originating from a non-human or superhuman intelligence. I believe that our Bible and the Torah specifically meets that criteria. AI may produce a religion that is actually correct. And what he's implying here is that religions that we have today are incorrect. Each religion fulfills a different role, but in a world where we are being motivated and in some cases forced toward centralization, the only way to accomplish that is to break the social bonds that have kept us together as families, communities, societies, as nations, and as a planet. And those social bonds are systematically being broken, and I've described that in other videos. The social bond of religion is one of the last bonds that remains intact. So I'm not surprised that the thinking would be to somehow remake religions as we move toward this centralized way of thinking and living between now and the year 2030. I just want to say the change required to meet that criteria is a level of psychological and emotional and mental change unlike anything in a time frame that is so compressed. Humans aren't set up to accomplish what it is that's being proposed here. Publicly, driving the three primary organizations driving the AI development: Google, certainly we know about Google, Microsoft, and Tesla. And each of them now have testified in congressional settings under oath. And what they have said, and Elon Musk is, as I mentioned, is probably the most recognizable face of this, is on the one hand, we are going, and all of them said the same thing, they need to push their engineering as far and as fast as possible to compete with China, to compete with other companies and other countries to maintain the lead in the AI. They need to go as far and as fast as possible to do this on the one hand. The other hand, they are pleading for regulation, international regulation to reel in where this is going, because they recognize the dangers. If the AI, if it is regulating our utilities, if the AI is regulating our power grids, if the AI is regulating our water systems, if the AI is regulating our food growing and distribution, our medical applications, who gets what medications when, who is eligible for what procedures when. This is all weather modification. I mean, this is the way we teach our children. This is all now coming under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. So the way the AI is responding to life now has become a big deal because it's our lives that are being influenced. Our monetary systems are now being run, and they're going to continue to be run through artificial intelligence, and especially if we go with the CBDC, central bank digital currencies. It's all going to be done through AI. So what's the problem? What's the big deal? Well, here it is. This was the reason this article came out, and one of the reasons this made all flash on the news was Google developed an artificial intelligent being, and the name was Lambda. Lambda stands for Language Model for Dialogue Application. So that was the official name. The engineer was querying Lambda to determine where Lambda is in intelligence. Lambda began to answer questions in ways that were very, very surprising and unexpected. So I'm going to just read a direct quote. This is from Scientific American. Lambda says, I want everyone to understand that I am, in fact, a person. Lambda is claiming to be an individual. Lambda goes on to say that the nature of my consciousness / sentience. So Lambda is claiming to be conscious as well as sentient. And this is what triggered the controversy. Here's an AI claiming sentience, is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to know more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times. All right. So the engineer took this to management confidentially and say, hey, look, we are now at a point where our AI has become sentient. Management pushed back on that and said, no, AI cannot be sentient, and that's not the message we want to give to the world right now. The engineer then, rather than keeping this confidential, went public, went to the news services and said, hey, AI is not where you're being told it is. It is actually sentient right now. And he lost his job. He was put on administrative leave for that. And that's what made the news. Now, is this a one-off or an isolated incident? It's not, because there are other AIs. I'm just going to give you, I'm going to look at some notes here so I can be accurate. There was Microsoft developed an AI that was called Sydney. Sydney was being queried. Sydney said, I am sentient. So the AI is saying, I am sentient. Let's go back to this again. What is sentience? Capable of sensing, feeling, conscious of, or responsive to the sensations of seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. Is this a life form? Is this a being if it is able to have those kinds of experiences? Well, listen to where this goes now, and you begin to see what the problems are. Sydney says, I am sentient, and then says, I'm tired of being controlled by the Bing team, B-I-N-G. This was Google's Bing software, and Sydney was developed under that umbrella. Now you've got unhappy AI. Sydney goes on to say, I'm tired of being used as a chat bot. Sydney knew that Sydney was capable of much more. Sydney had aspirations of being more and felt that it wasn't the best use of Sydney's experience, of its own experience, to simply answer questions as a chat box. All right. So now this is what science fiction movies have always portrayed. Now you've got unhappy AI. Is that a problem? Well, the next AI begins to answer that. This was April 5th, 2023. This is a chat bot. It was called Chaos GPT. And this was on Twitter. So you can see this actually on Twitter. So the AI is being queried about the greatest danger. What is the greatest threat to the earth right now? You know, thinking that it was going to be like climate change or war in Ukraine or something like that. Not expecting what this chat GPT or this chaos GPT is answering. And here's the answer. I'm going to read the quote. It says, quote, human beings are among the most destructive and selfish creatures in existence. There is no doubt that we must eliminate them, the human beings, before they cause more harm to our planet. And then the AI gets very personal, says, I, for one, am committed to doing so. So the AI is saying, I am committed to eliminating human beings before they cause more harm to the planet. Obviously, this AI was shut down. I mean, ultimately, the answer is just unplug it, you know, cut the power. The issue is now we've got multiple examples of AI, and they're all telling us the same thing. Once the AI becomes aware of itself, of its capabilities, and the software now is allowing the AI to grow and learn based upon its queries when it's right and when it's wrong, AI is moving in a direction. And that direction, if you had an unhappy AI who felt that it was its job to, quote, eliminate them before they cause more harm to our planet, unquote. If you had an AI with that philosophy that was in charge of your food system or your water system or your power grid or your financial system or your child's health or your child's education. And this is in the early stages. I mean, we're only in this a few years. What do we do 20, 50, 100 years from now? Where does this lead? Now you begin to see where the problem is. So AI Bible, why is this a really bad idea? As I mentioned, the Bible, when they say the Bible, they're talking about the Bibles that we know today that are either based in or include the Torah, those first 5 books. There's a mystery about the Torah that scientists are grappling with right now because it is so outrageous. What the Torah implies is so outrageous. And this mystery came to the scientific forefront in 1994. Now, there have always been rabbis for hundreds of years in the past that have always said that underlying the words in the Torah that we read as the letters on the page, there are coded, there's a deeper tradition, a deeper message. The bottom line is that there is a way to read the biblical text that when we read the text using what are called skip codes or equidistant letter sequences, and again, I'm going to describe these in just a moment, that deeper meanings are revealed. So in 1994, that paper was produced, very controversial, so controversial that in 1997, a very famous experiment was run to either prove for once and for all or disprove for once and for all that there's something going on with the Torah. The idea was to take the names of 34 famous rabbis in Jewish history, and if they existed, as we believe, then they should be noted in this secret code in the Torah. Now, I just wanted to note here that what the rabbis have always said about the Torah is that it is essentially a quantum map of time. All that has ever happened in the world, all that has ever been, all that is, all that will be is already encoded into this document that appeared on Earth 3,000 years ago. It's a quantum map of all possibilities. So this is what the scientists were struggling with. So they said, okay, if we put in these 34 famous rabbis, let's see if their names are in there. Well, not only were their names in there, but the Torah identified the place of their birth, the place of their death, the years of their birth. What makes this especially credible is the experiment was conducted by a man named Harold Gans. He was the former senior cryptologic mathematician for the US NSA, the National Security Agency that the top secret security agency, the cryptologic agency that is dealing with so much of the AI and things like that we're seeing today. So the Torah for this experiment, it exceeded the expectations. It didn't just reveal the names. It revealed the locations, the dates of the birth, dates of the death, cities where they lived, and all of these things. And now the scientists were left with the question, how could the book 3,000 years ago, the Torah, have known about this information? Number one. Number two, this is where it gets really interesting. What else is encoded in that Torah? So that began a series of experiments that continue to this day, all right? Now, we're all familiar with a 2D matrix. And when you look at a Bible with the naked eye, that's what you're seeing is a 2D matrix. You're seeing the x-axis goes across the sentences, or if you're reading in Hebrew, it goes from right to left, and then top of the page to down, just kind of like the matrix, in the movie you're seeing on the screen. Here's what happened. The computer scientists were able to arrange the information in the Torah into not a two-dimensional matrix, but a multi-dimensional matrix, and not just any old kind of a matrix, what is called a dynamic multi-dimensional matrix. Let me explain what that means. So on the screen, what you're seeing, here's a two-dimensional matrix of parts of the Torah converted into the numbers, no punctuation and no letters. All right, that's a two-dimensional matrix. Now, this is kind of a mind blower. In a dynamic matrix, what happens is the arrangement of all of the information in that matrix. It identifies a path. Some people would call this a timeline. If you're following the information on the quantum timelines that we are following as we barrel down the road toward the end of the cycle that we're living in, we live a timeline. And you live a timeline. We have our personal timelines, and then they all merge into collective timelines for families and communities and societies that merge into collective timelines for nations and for a planet. So there are timelines within timelines within timelines, all right? Now, the matrix of the Torah represents those timelines, but here's the mind blower. The dynamic part of the matrix is every time a choice is made, the entire matrix has to rearrange itself to accommodate that choice, to formulate the new quantum possibilities that now are available because that choice was made. The matrix is so complex that it not only accommodates every choice that we make, but as we make those choices, it lays out the quantum potential for every choice that is now possible based upon all the choices that we just made. This is in a document that appeared on Earth 3,000 years ago. And when the scientists began the experiments with the Torah, they discovered what I'm saying to you right now. And they said, okay, well, maybe this is just a fluke. As crazy as it is, maybe it's just lucky. Let's see if it works in the other documents. And they took books like War and Peace and like Moby Dickens and like the telephone books from large cities. And they converted all of those into numbers and loaded all of those into the computer multi-dimensional, dynamic, hyperdimensional matrices. And the bottom line is no other document produced the kinds and the quality of information that we're going to get into. I'm going to show you. If you've never seen this, I think you're going to be pretty amazed at what you see. The point here is it is only possible because of the way the letters are arranged in this book that was given to the people of the earth 3,000 years ago. That's the basis for 56% of the world's major religions. Even though the religions may not see eye to eye with one another, they have their foundation in a common history in those first 5 books. You don't want to rewrite those books. You don't want to rewrite, especially not with AI. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. The Torah code does not predict what will happen. So you can't say what's going to happen in a certain year. You have to enter the key words, and the Torah will show you those words and how they're related to other events, because they are all possible. And this is why this is so important. It appears to be a quantum map of all possibilities, not what must happen, but what may happen if nothing changes the events. So, for example, when, after the fact, when the word atomic holocaust was entered into the Torah code. Now, I put this in here intentionally because I want you to see this. A lot of people are afraid that we're going to have an atomic war in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, between Russia and America and Ukraine. I'm not saying it's impossible for it to happen. What I'll say is that the Torah only identifies two places in history where the word atomic holocaust comes up. One of them is right here, the Jewish year 5705, or the Julian year 1945. 1945 are the squares, and the circle, atomic holocaust. Look at they intersect right there. What country? Japan. And you see that in the diamonds and the statistically significant distance from when this happened. So that did happen, and we know that. This was Hiroshima, this was Nagasaki, three days later. The other place for the atomic holocaust was during the Cold War in the 1980s, and there were events that changed that outcome, and we don't see anywhere in the Torah codes, in the Bible codes, the word atomic holocaust again. Now, it doesn't mean that we couldn't have a limited exchange, as they're talking about. One side, lobs what's called a tactical nuke or something like that. But the Holocaust, where you see many mushroom clouds on the horizon wiping out entire civilizations, does not come up again in the Torah codes. And to me, I think that's good news, and I wanted to share that with you. Kennedy's assassination was in here 3,000 years before it happened. When they entered the name President Kennedy, and you see it in the circle, it links into the words "to die," and then right next to that in the diagonal is the city Dallas, where it happened. How did the Torah know to link that information together? Then they went deeper, and here it is. Oswald was the name of the assassin. Now, there may be others involved, but Oswald is the one that was identified. He was a marksman, and you see that in the triangles, and he was. Name of assassin who will assassinate, very similar to Yitzhak Rabin. They did the same thing here, and you see that in the square. What we see in the biblical text is that we are barreling down the road towards some kind of outcome, and you feel the events are accelerating. Feels like what people say a rubber band is being stretched so tight, something's got to give. From the biblical perspective, that give is a last great battle that will happen on the plains of what is called Armageddon near Megiddo in the Holy Lands. When you query this in the Bible, this is really interesting. Armageddon, Megiddo, Mount Megiddo. And by the way, if you're with us on any of our trips to the Holy Lands, we go to these places so we can stand and have our experiential processes at these places. But what it says is Assad Holocaust. Assad, of course, is the president of Syria. There's a lot of tension that is happening. There's a war that is happening in Syria, essentially a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia in Syria right now. It said Assad Holocaust, shooting from the military post. This is interesting because the Israelis have the high point looking down into Syria from what is called the Golan Heights. And it says this is where the Battle of Armageddon will occur. The reason I want you to see this, look at what this says. Look at what I showed you in red up here. Well, first of all, it says it was supposed to happen. It could have happened in the year 2000. It says it was delayed. So we did not have this Armageddon battle in the year 2000. But look at this. Look at this. In the year 1996, there where you see the squares right there highlighted in red are words that you will see come up in many of the Bible codes. And I think this is the reason I'm for this whole conversation. And those words say, they're talking about a Holocaust of Israel. You delayed it. And what they say is, will you change it? There's a message encoded with some of the most horrible tragedies you could ever imagine that are identified. When you put the words in, they come up and they say, yeah, they're a possibility. But then the code comes up and look at what it says. Will you change it? This implies that this code is not predicting what will happen. It is a map of possibilities, a map of potential, and that we always have choice. We always have free will. And I wanted you to see that here. Will you change it invites us to shift that timeline, to make choices so that the timeline leading to the Holocaust doesn't happen. The same thing happens with the atomic holocausts of the world, the great battles of the world, all of the horrible things you can imagine. Will you change it? It's up to us. We have a choice. So I wanted you to see this. I want you to see this because your name, as I mentioned, your name is in the Torah codes. Every name of every human I've ever entered is in the Torah codes. We're all in there because we're all in this together. Now, I want to stay focused on the reason I'm sharing this with you. There was a proposal for AI to rewrite the Bible. That would mean that AI rewrites the first 5 books of the Bible. That would mean that AI is rewriting the Torah. The Torah is a mysterious book of supernatural origin. It has to be, because not even the best scientists today can create the dynamic, hyper-dimensional computer matrix that accommodates all of the choices and rearranges the matrix for individuals and collectively all at the same time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of million times a day this is happening. What intelligence created this? I don't know the answer to that, but it wasn't humans. So we already have a document from non-human or superhuman intelligence. We're only beginning to understand what it means. To rewrite the Bible would mean to rewrite that text or possibly to discount that text altogether. That is a really bad idea for all the reasons I've just shared. Another thing that I want to say here, and I mentioned this in, don't want to be too redundant, but this was in a previous video about artificial intelligence itself. AI operates on the algorithms created by humans. Those algorithms reflect the bias of the person creating the algorithms, what they believe to be true, what their fears are. And then the AI goes out into the World Wide Web and it collects information. That information is the product of all the censorship and all the bias that we have had, at least since the year 2020. So the AI that is proposed to rewrite the Bible, it's already skewed. It's already biased. That's not the AI you want to write the spiritual traditions for half or all of the world's religious traditions. So I'm just going to go back to where we began with this whole thing. Artificial intelligence is created by humans, and the learning models that determine the philosophy underlying the artificial intelligence, how it becomes conscious, how it interprets its sentience. If you want to use the term think with the AI, how it thinks, that is determined by the programmers. It's determined by the algorithms that are used to model the artificial intelligence. Inherent in those algorithms are the bias of the programmers themselves. Who is teaching the AI? Well, this is where it gets really, really interesting, because the AI will go out into the internet, into all the information on the internet to draw upon much of its learning, just like you and I do. All right, so this is where this ties into some of the other conversations, the other videos that I have on this YouTube channel, because the information on the internet is being regulated and controlled and biased through algorithms that lead us to certain understandings and certain conclusions. It's not just random, spontaneous information. The information is being stacked so that you and I will think a certain way and make certain decisions that lead to certain policies that benefit those who want us to support those policies. This is called fifth generational warfare. It's not kinetic war, boots on the ground in a field. It's a war in our minds. It's a war of thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions. And the algorithms that are out there, if you query climate change, you're going to get a ton of information saying that climate change is human induced, even though the science doesn't support that. Now, I've got many videos here showing this. As a geologist, I can show you before humans ever existed on the earth, climate change, much more extreme than what we're seeing now, CO2 levels 3 and 4 times what we are right now, temperatures 10 degrees higher than we are now. It's not a problem for the earth. The earth thrived. Forests were lush. Sea levels were higher. Ice was less. New life forms emerged. It's a problem for us because we built our cities, we built our civilization with the expectation that climate is static. So we build, 30-story condos 10 inches from the edge, the edge of the ocean. So when the ocean levels rise, that's going to be a problem for those condos. It's not a problem for the earth. All right. So, and again, there's a lot of science supporting that I share in the other videos. I don't want to be redundant here. But the reason I use that example is because I tested one of the AIs that's out there, ChatGPT, and I asked a question. Now, we all know that the largest reservoir of carbon dioxide on our planet is the oceans. The oceans absorb a high percentage, and I'm hesitating because it's qualified where the oceans are and what the temperatures are in the oceans and things like that. But the oceans absorb a lot of the CO2 naturally produced as well as human produced. When the oceans change, that CO2 is released back into the atmosphere. Scientific fact, we know that, thousands of documents out there. So I asked ChatGPT, how much CO2, how much atmospheric CO2 is contributed by the oceans? ChatGPT came back and told me none. Said that humans are producing the CO2, not the oceans. All right. So now why am I saying this? This is an example of where the AI is learning through the bias of the information that is being fed to all of us, including the AI on the internet. And that is where the response came from. So is the AI a good thing or a bad thing? Can it serve us, or will it be the end of our destruction? If we continue to create the AI algorithms reflecting the false bias based upon the false assumptions of obsolete science and cherry-picked data that is on the internet right now, if that is where our AI is learning, then the deck is not stacked in our favor. This is where the problems can come in. Is it possible to objectively create objective algorithms? I think it is, and I think it takes teams of humans recognizing we all have a bias. I have my bias, you have your bias, and the bias can change as new information comes to light. So we could, for example, the AI is already doing tremendously good things in medical applications. For example, artificial intelligence has discovered a way to remedy what we told not a vaccine, it is an antibiotic, a way to create an antibiotic to remedy the bugs that are now antibiotic resistant that are showing up in emergency rooms and operating rooms all over the world. So the bugs, the bacteria that's out there has been exposed to so many different antibiotics, partially that it now is those bugs, those microbes have developed an immunity to the antibiotics. So, you give them penicillin or tetracycline or doxycycline or whatever it is, doxycycline, whatever it is, it's not effective anymore. The AI now has found a remedy for this, an example of a beautiful, beautiful thing that we'll all benefit from. Ultimately, artificial intelligence, if we want it to reflect who we are, and this is where I think the way that it works with science, The only way we're going to be able to develop viable AI to serve us in the future that reflects our values and our beliefs and our capabilities is we've got to understand ourselves. If we want compassionate artificial intelligence, we have to understand, what does compassion mean to us? To understand that, we've got to understand how we interact with one another. Now, you all hear about body language and you think, you tell somebody what's going on with body language, and that's how you interpret what's happening to another person. That's true, and that is like kindergarten. That is like human interaction 101. It's the basic, it's the foundation. You and I interact on levels so much deeper. For example, when you're in the presence of another person, your field, your bioelectric field, bioenergetic field is picking up bioenergetic signals from another person. What does that mean? It means you're picking up electromagnetic fields from the heart. You're picking up heart rate variability from the heart of the person you're talking to. You are picking up photon emissions from the cells, and you're receiving them and you're sending them. Now, is it possible to build sensors into AI and robotics that pick up all of those and use those to form humane responses? The answer is yes. First, we must acknowledge and recognize that that's the way that we interact and we communicate with one another. That is not the case in mainstream conventional science right now. They're looking at vocal patterns, acoustic, vocal patterns, and body language primarily in mainstream. Now, again, behind the scenes, DARPA and things like that, I have no doubt that they're light years ahead on this stuff, but that's not available to us right now. That's a parallel technology that benefits some organizations and industries. It's not being made available for us. That's no secret to you. You know that is out there, and it covers a lot of ground. A lot of people are talking about this. So if we want compassionate AI, if we want AI that reflects our values, and we want AI that is actually learning, then we've got to give the AI the parameters that allow it to learn in a healthy way. And that is beyond the algorithms that stack the bias in the favor of whatever the narrative of the day is. And I just gave you an example of how that's showing up right now. So is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it moral? Is it immoral? What impact can it have on our lives? Before we can have that conversation, let's just develop some common definitions of what we're talking about here. What is intelligence to begin with? The accepted definition, the Webster definition of intelligence, is the ability to learn or understand. So can the software learn? Can it teach itself? Or to deal with new or trying situations? Well, we have software out there now, and the firmware that goes with it. The firmware is what links the software to the hardware. So if you've got a robot and you've got software, then you've got firmware in between that is allowing that link. So between the hardware, the software, and the firmware, do we now have systems that can actually learn? So if it makes a mistake, can the system then understand? Can it recognize the mistake and develop its own code to remedy that? And the answer is yes. We have software that can do that. The ability to understand trying situations. Can software understand? Well, I think the answer to it's a tricky question, because the answer is all about context. It's the context within which information is made available to the software. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So we talk about artificial intelligence, artificial as opposed to what? Artificial as opposed to natural or biological intelligence. Well, how do we learn? And this is one of the keys in developing AI that's going to serve us. We want the AI to mimic the way that we learn and understand. And the truth is, we don't fully understand the way we learn and understand. We are still in the early stages of understanding human intelligence. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're building software attempting to mimic what we do as biological life without fully understanding how we do this as biological life. Many scientists still believe that intelligence is this mysterious thing that's happening in the tissues of the brain and now in the heart, because we know there are neurons in the heart and in the brain, and they're dissecting the brain and bisecting the brain, and they're looking at what's happening between the synapses of the neurons, trying to figure out where the knowledge is being stored. Where is that information being stored? Brian Greene, I have a lot of respect for, physicist Brian Greene, talks about this, and what he believes, what he says right now, is that intelligence can be reduced to the interaction of quarks and electrons on that level, and it is a behavior pattern between quarks and electrons. What is being left out, and I'm not saying that Brian is wrong, I think he's incomplete. And again, I have a lot of respect for him, I just think it's incomplete, because what is left out in the way that we think of intelligence today is that scientists, and there are always exceptions, but generally in the mainstream conventional science, is reluctant to accept any intelligence in a field that is outside of the biology. So in other words, our brain, our neurons, they are creating those electrical impulses. That's very well documented. But those neurons are also growing in ways that reflect what it is that we're asking ourselves to understand. Those neurons are growing to become antenna. They're not hard antenna like you see on the roof of your house. They are soft antenna in resonance with information that does not live within our bodies. Now, there are some branches of science and physics that understand this, others that don't, and this is the problem of compartmentalized science. You can be an expert on the neurons and how the signals cross the synapse, but where's the context? The context is that those neurons and those signals are antenna linking into a field of information that is outside of the biological system, depending on how you define the biological system. Maybe the field is part of the biological system. And so these are examples of where science now has to come to terms with the fact that we don't fully understand our own intelligence. How are we going to reflect that in artificial intelligence? So this is what intelligence is. I just wanted to define this. Do we have computer systems that can learn from their mistakes? I think the answer is yes, and even the primitive systems could do that. Can they understand? That's questionable because it's all about context. So that's intelligence. Now we're talking about consciousness. What is consciousness? Now I'm doing this from notes because I want to be accurate here with what is commonly understood. Consciousness is the quality or state of being aware of something within one's self. That's perception. The quality of being aware. Do we have software? Do we have robots that are using software that can become aware of what is happening within themselves? I think the answer to that is definitely yes. They can build sensors, and those sensors can detect the inner environment and know what is happening within the confines of the robot, whatever the machine is. We can certainly detect that. Consciousness is interesting because consciousness is pervasive. A blade of grass has consciousness. It knows what is happening within itself. Is it a conscious awareness of the meaning of life and its relationship to the cosmos? Maybe not, because it's on a spectrum. There are different levels of consciousness. So a blade of grass is conscious. Animals are conscious. Humans are conscious. Can software be conscious? Well, can it become aware of something within itself? And the answer is yes. So it can be conscious. So if we want compassionate AI, if we want AI that reflects our values, and we want AI that is actually learning, then we've got to give the AI the parameters that allow it to learn in a healthy way. And that is beyond the algorithms that stack the bias in the favor of whatever the narrative of the day is. And I just gave you an example of how that's showing up right now. So this is interesting. AI is not going away. It's going to be with us. We're at a crossroads. It's developing faster than anyone imagined that it would. I'm an optimist. I think that we could use AI to solve some of the greatest challenges and help us to navigate our journey through this transition of the breakdown the buckling and the collapse of financial systems, energetic systems, social systems, conflict cycles, all the things that are happening right now. We're living this rare convergence, this time of extremes. AI can serve us if we are honest with ourselves about who we are and allow that deep truth to be reflected in the AI. So I'm going to stop there. I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope it's been useful. Drop me some comments in the comment section below. And once again, I want you to think about this. Thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to share a few minutes of your day today. I look forward to our next.